Max Verstappen is breezing to a second straight Formula 1 title despite his car having a problem that Red Bull can't easily fix. F1's new 2022 technical rules have created cars that don't naturally blend with the style Verstappen was able to use to such effect with the high-rake Red Bulls that were developed over the previous rules cycle. It might not look like it's holding Verstappen back that much with 8 victories so far and an 80-point lead in the championship. But this season still falls short of his impossibly high standards because Red Bull hasn't quite got its 2022 car the way he wants it. The question is, how much can Red Bull actually do to fix that when it involves factors outside of the team's control? At his most unsatisfied this year, Verstappen's been angry. Red Bull has had some weaknesses and Verstappen's got very little patience, especially when he's in the car. Flickers of poor reliability, an overweight car, and occasional lack of qualifying pace have all set Verstappen off at some point, and all still exist as problems for Red Bull to conclusively resolve. This isn't good enough for Verstappen because he is relentless, even when things look as good as they do right now in the championship. He even said before the summer break that he wouldn't be spending August on a beach somewhere and that the points picture didn't matter because he's chasing perfection. A champion's mentality is simple, things can always be better. One limitation that Verstappen has just had to learn to deal with though is an underlying trait of the RB18 that upgrades alone can't cure. The 2022 rules and the first generation of the tyres Pirelli developed for this year's 18-inch wheels have combined to create quite understeery and lazy cars in general. We'll get into the reasons why shortly. The Red Bull exhibits this effect more than the Ferrari, and Verstappen was plagued by it most in Monaco and Azerbaijan, 2 street tracks with slower corners which Verstappen admits he finds tougher in the 2022 car. It's no coincidence that those 2 circuits are where Verstappen suffered just 2 of 3 qualifying defeats to teammate Sergio Perez this season. A simple explanation of why this is the case is because a calmer front end imposes a limit on the car's performance. Verstappen can still get to that limit, but a lesser driver, sorry Checo, can get there too, or at least can get closer than if the car was more nervous. In F1 that often gets referred to as the car being more on the nose. This is where Verstappen excels, as he can demonstrate an incredible command of a car that's got more front end grip. The easier the rear of the car can be rotated, the more a driver can manipulate that rotation, but it also means the car is more unsettled and therefore is more prone to errors. It's a knife-edge balance, and Verstappen is part of an elite crop of drivers who can judge that time and time again. This is where Verstappen wants the RB18 to get to. He and the team have talked about trying to give the Red Bull a more positive front, and the development direction of the car is aimed at achieving that. It's already been somewhat successful, resulting in a happier Verstappen and unsurprisingly giving him a more consistent and comfortable advantage over Perez, who has struggled to deal with that car in the same way he could in the early races when it was more understeery. But the efforts to fully transform the RB18's balance have still been limited by other factors. One reason is simply the Pirelli tyres. Although Verstappen hasn't criticised Pirelli for what it's produced in 2022. He's actually highlighted that the manufacturer was limited in what it could do by having to work with so-called mule cars during its development program. That meant Pirelli based its 2022 tyres around estimates of how much downforce the real cars would produce and how balanced they would be. So Verstappen's just pointed out that the natural consequence of the actual 2022 cars producing more downforce at the rear is understeer. Pirelli doesn't deny this. In fact, Pirelli F1 boss Mario Isola has openly talked about working on a stronger front tyre for 2023, which if successful would naturally dial out some of the understeer that has plagued the majority of cars, not just the Red Bull. Pirelli's developing new constructions front and rear to cope with the realities of the 2022 cars and the expected gains in downforce for 2023. It's not a revolution in tyre design. Isola talks about trying to reduce the understeer through construction, not compound, and by that he means not producing a different compound for the front compared to the rear. The focus is on improving the cornering stiffness of the tyre, which will optimise the tyre's footprint. That means how much of the tyre remains in contact with the track and can be used mid-corner. Verstappen's optimistic this will help, but he suspects it will not cure all of the problems the new generation of cars suffer from. He, like many drivers, laments the fact that F1's minimum weight limit has ballooned for this year by almost 50 kilograms. And Verstappen reckons that weight penalty is so big that even with better front tyres, the cars will still be awkward, lazy and a bit slow at low speed and still have a problem with degradation during races. Another reason for the understeering trait that Verstappen dislikes is the centre of pressure in the 2022 cars. It's a slight oversimplification, but the centre of pressure is effectively the average of the downforce produced at the front and rear of the car. The emphasis on ground effect aerodynamics on the 2022 cars and how hard the floors are working means the centre of pressure is more rearward than before, so the cars produce more downforce at the rear than the front, which will mean an aero balance that naturally induces understeer, and manipulating that balance is difficult, especially at low speed. But it's not impossible. Verstappen's primary rival in 2022, Charles Leclerc, has talked about his Ferrari having an unstable rear from the start of the season, and like Verstappen, Leclerc thrives with such a balance. So Ferrari's worked out how to give its driver that from the beginning, and Red Bull has made progress in this area too. But the two teams will have different car concepts, and major design changes which will be required to influence car behaviour to such a big degree will probably have to wait until next year. And until the external variables start to change as well, like potentially having stronger front tyres, Red Bull and Verstappen will simply have to work around the existing limitation. Away from this specific focus, there is a separate need for Red Bull to address its own weakness to make its car faster in the interim. Ferrari has been the better performer in qualifying sessions, taking 8 poles out of 13, with Red Bull taking 4 and Mercedes just 1. Red Bull comfortably has the better record on race days, winning 9 races, and Verstappen's personal tally of 8 victories plus 2 sprint race wins is why he's leading the Drivers' Championship by such a big margin. Part of the reason for this is that the RB18 has carried a weight penalty since the start of the season and will continue to run above the weight limit until it gets a few kilos lighter. Red Bull was reckoned to be around 15 kilos overweight in pre-season, and we understand it got this down to around 7.5 kilos by the time of the Miami Grand Prix in May. But subsequent car upgrades are reckoned to have pushed this weight up a little to potentially around 10 kilos overweight by July. This can be thanks to more robust components or aero parts that are more intricate and potentially carry more weight as a result. A heavier car gives Red Bull a disadvantage in both qualifying and the race. It's free lap time that's being given away, and short of bringing lighter components, there's not an upgrade that can just overcome that. Verstappen has consistently pointed out it is a bigger loss in qualifying, because relative to the opposition, the Red Bull is simply heavier when the fuel is drained from the tank. The Ferrari may be as much as 10 kilos lighter, and around a lap, that 10 kilos would be estimated to cost 3 to 4 tenths in lap time depending on the track configuration. Despite that, increased aero performance and improved balance characteristics that come with upgrades can be worth the weight sacrifice, especially if any upgrades that add weight are part of a development path that will yield more gains down the line, and lighter versions of the upgraded parts are also in the offing. This gives Red Bull an obvious target, and we know it's one that it is chasing. And it brings us back to Verstappen's repetition of the fact that even with such strong championship positions, improvements can and must be made. That can be things directly in Red Bull's control, like the weight, or it can be significantly more complex tasks, like fighting the physics that define how these 2022 cars behave.